Hey up, Blogosphere. I quite fancy having a metal cutting bandsaw in the workshop, but I can't really justify spending what they cost. Let's see if we can knock one up out of this wood that I've got left over from the workbench. I've roughed out these holes freehand, but in order to get a good final size and a snug fit on the thing that goes in there, which we'll come to in a minute, I've made this printed router template for a bearing trimmer to run around. So as for what goes here, when I see people building DIY bandsaws on Tinternet, I see people buying individual bearings and an axle and machining a hole, and that all works fine. But I looked at the price of bearings and found that for less money you can buy one of these beautifully machined front-wheel drive car hubs, which contain a huge bearing, more than rated for any of the forces that it'll ever see in this application. And it comes with this nice, true running, flat face, big flanges. I have no idea how they make this for their money. It's totally off-brand. I would never buy one this cheap and put it on a car. But if you want to build a bandsaw, £16 delivered. How do they do it? It's beautiful. They even come with the bolts. I'm just screwing these on temporarily for the minute because the back halves of these are going to get a steel bracket that'll allow me to twist these flanges so as to make the blade run true. This one needs to be adjustable so as to set the tension. So it's bolted to this fabricated steel bracket that can slide back and forth in there. Now we just need some wheels. The slidey bit needs to be held flat in its slot because there's force trying to tip it out, which is what these steel bits are for. This one also carries the pivot for the tension lever. So these two don't do an awful lot because the blade tension is trying to lift it on the diagonal like this. This one's doing almost nothing, this one's probably only doing a bit. And this one might even be completely unnecessary. And this one's doing the bulk of the heavy lifting, which is why it's got more screws. So this is the tension lever that sets the tension on the blade by sliding this piece back and forwards. It's all quite tight around this area, and it's a bit of a jigsaw to get it together. It's certainly not quite right at the moment, but it's probably good enough for a bit of a test, and I can make some tweaks to this later. This is the back of the top wheel, and rather than just washers under the bolt heads, this one gets a bracket, and it's got this long outrigger that allows me to provide counter traction to cancel out any cupping of the frame that occurs due to blade tension. And so if I stick a long bit of threaded rod on here down to the other edge of the frame, I should be able to cancel out any twist in this wheel and set the blade tracking centrally. So with tension on the blade, and in fact it's been sitting overnight, the frame hasn't made any nasty creaking, cracking sounds. The wheels have stayed more or less pointing in the direction that they were before. It's not perfect, but as a first assembly without any shimming, I think this is pretty good. The blade stays where it is, doesn't wander off to one side. It's not quite running central on this wheel yet, which I will take out with a bit of shimming. Basically, I want to make it run in the same position on all three wheels, and then when the tension of thicker blades makes it run more to the front because it'll cup like this, then I can adjust that out by tilting that wheel back. But pretty happy with this so far. So I think the next thing to do is to try it with a little bit of motive power, and for that we'll need a motor. And now we've got a motor, we're going to need some means of attaching it. It's getting pretty heavy now. I thought that being made out of wood it would be light, but no. Obviously I need some way of coupling the drive from the motor to this wheel, which is why I've made this. Now, this is obviously a very token effort at transferring any serious amount of torque. This is just 3D printed adapters onto a piece of 10mm square bar. But it was a quick and easy way to do it. This spline for the Volkswagen hub is quite a complicated thing. I wouldn't want to try and machine that on machines that I don't have. So this is a nice easy way to check if it works. It'll also provide a weak link in case I have an accident. But once I've proved that it all works okay, I'll make this piece again but out of steel. There we go. I've had to borrow the VFD off the lathe to try this out because the one from the Scratter, which is the one I usually repurpose for projects, has failed. It trips all the breakers, and even if you bypass the earth it doesn't run the motor, so just generally bad. So I've turned this one down and we'll give it a go. Alright, let's get a blade on it. Wow, that's actually quite tight. So I'd call that a successful proof of concept. Obviously it was squealing, but that's because this is a 32 TPI blade that I bought for cutting thin sheet metal, not plywood. But overall, I think it proves the idea. It ran pretty true, despite the fact there's no guides on it, and I could get plenty of tension on it without the frame exploding. Obviously there's plenty left to do, but this video's gone on long enough, so join me in part 2, where I'll finish this off. Bye for now. No, you can't go out. Come back in here and eat this pineapple. Grass.